Everyone's waiting for lower rates, but what if I told you the next leg down could actually push 30-year fixed rates higher? See, here's the thing. The Fed is split, Powell is on his way out, which means Trump is likely to appoint someone way more dovish. But here's the twist. That move could actually create global uncertainty, weaken investor confidence, and steepen the long end of the yield curve. Translation, you could get lower short-term rates and higher mortgage rates. So my question for you is, do you think the Fed's next move is going to push rates higher or push them lower? Let me know in the comments. Current Fed members are split. About half are arguing for more cuts to avoid over-tightening, while the other half thinks inflation isn't dead and we don't need to cut anymore. But with that, Powell has been very cautious. He's very methodical, not really revealing his cards, but also keeping rates higher for longer. And because of that, many out there believe that once Powell leaves, Trump's going to replace him with a more dovish Fed chair, who will actually go with his agenda and start to slash rates. But here's the risk. A politically motivated pivot, that in turn could drive long-term rates higher, even if the short-term policy rates fall. And that's because the steepening yield curve equals higher 30-year fixed mortgage rates. So if you're one of those people sitting on the sidelines thinking that the Fed is going to save you 1%, well, the bond market might have other plans. So what are the hawkish Fed members actually saying? Well, Susan Collins from the Boston Fed believes that there is no urgency to ease, while Raphael Bostic from the Atlanta Fed, who is probably the most hawkish Fed member, says that we may ease later this year, maybe, while also saying the path to 2% inflation may be slower than expected. And on top of that, you have Loretta Mester from the Cleveland Fed, who says that I need more evidence that inflation is on a sustainable path, while also mentioning that further rate hikes are on the table. So the theme amongst these hawkish members is that core inflation is way too high, while also warning against premature cuts, as well as the willingness to raise again if needed. And then on the flip side, you have the Dove saying that progress is happening, and let's not overdo it. So let's start with Austin Goolsbee from the Chicago Fed. He says that we're on a path to 2% inflation and that we should not overreact to a couple of hot months. In addition, you have Mary Daly from the San Francisco Fed saying that we need to fight inflation without killing the economy. And then Lori Logan from the Dallas Fed saying that if disinflation continues, that more rate cuts are on the table. So as you can see, the water's a little muddy when trying to figure out where interest rates are headed. So I want to take a little bit of time here and talk about why buying now with a 6.25% interest rate is better than waiting for interest rates to move down. And the number one reason is so that you can lock in stability while everybody out there is chasing headlines. The best thing you can do as a first-time home buyer is stabilize your housing payment. And the number one way to do that is by buying a home. And that's because there's no such thing as a 30-year fixed rent payment. Rent payments go up almost every single year, somewhere between 3 and 5% in most areas of the country. And the earlier in your life you can stabilize that housing payment, the better off you're going to be long term. And the main reason for that is because you're fixing the largest part of your monthly housing expense, which is that mortgage payment. And as you get older and advance through your career, the more money you're going to make. So the less that mortgage payment is going to be of your overall budget. In addition to that, the earlier you can do it, the earlier you start building equity in your property, instead of renting and waiting to see what happens. Now, there's nothing wrong with renting a home, as long as you understand that renting is buying you patience until you're ready to become a homeowner. Maybe you're not ready at the moment because you don't have money for a down payment. Maybe you don't have money for a closing cost. Maybe you're just not comfortable with the payment, or maybe your credit's not good. Those are valid reasons to sit on the sidelines and wait to buy a home. But if you're sitting on the sidelines waiting for the perfect opportunity, waiting for interest rates to come way down, waiting for home prices to come down, waiting for foreclosures or distressed sales to come around, then in my opinion, you're wasting time because there's no perfect opportunity. You need to buy when it's the right time in your life, when you have job stability, when you have relationship stability, when you have money in the bank, when you're comfortable with that payment. You don't have to like the payment every single month. I don't like my mortgage payment because ultimately it's higher than I would love to spend every single month, but I'm okay spending it because I'm comfortable with it. I know that whatever happens, I'm going to be able to make that payment every single month. At the same time, I've positioned myself to be able to refinance later if rates move down. And that's because I already own the asset. There's a lot of people sitting on the sidelines waiting for the perfect rate, waiting for home prices to come down, only to continue waiting as things don't happen the way that they thought they would happen. See, here's the thing. We've actually seen interest rates move down from just over 7% to start the year to where we sit today, somewhere around 6.25%. And with that move down, we've actually seen demand pick up, which in turn has created somewhat of a frenzy here in my local market. See, for a couple of months, we had actually transitioned out of that seller's market into somewhat of a buyer's market. Buyers had more leverage out there because inventory was picking up, rates were higher than people wanted to see, so homes were sitting on the market longer. And a lot of sellers out there that needed to move their properties were having to do price cuts. And with that, we were able to help a lot of buyers be able to buy properties for less than competing properties were actually selling for in some of these neighborhoods. But that's when interest rates were somewhere between 6.75 and say 7%. As rates started to come down under 6.5%, we saw a lot of buyer demand come back to the market. In fact, out of the last 4 offers that I've written, all of them have been multiple offer situations. In fact, one sold for over $100,000 over the asking price, which when you looked at the comps, the home was priced about right, but ended up selling somewhere between 7 to 8% above where it was listed. Now, I personally believe that was somewhat of a rare circumstance, and that's not going to happen on every single transaction. What I want to point out here is waiting for 5.5% interest rates, if you will, means absolutely nothing if the price of that home rises by 5 to 10%. And that's because you win nothing if your lower rate is canceled out by a higher price. Now, while I don't believe the advice of marry the house, date the rate, I do believe that you should focus more on finding the perfect home and worrying less about finding the perfect rate. And what I mean by that is that there's a chance that interest rates do come down. And assuming you can still qualify because you still have your job and your DTI works out well and you still have the equity in your property, you should be able to refinance and take that interest rate down. Now, you shouldn't be buying a home with that being the expectation and the only way you can afford it. You should be buying because it's the right time in your life. That's the perfect house. That's the one that you've been wanting to move in. It fits your lifestyle for, say, the next 7 to 10 years, with the hope that at some point in the future, interest rates are going to come down and you're going to be able to take advantage of that. See, as somebody who's been doing this 20 years, I've seen a lot of people tell me, hey, I'm going to buy when interest rates come down. I'm going to buy when the market calms down. And typically speaking, neither of those happen. Those people continue to wait on the sidelines because they're always searching for the perfect time. So my advice is to buy sooner than later with the expectation that, hey, things could get worse. Interest rates could move higher and make things more expensive. The likelihood of a crash coming is very, very low. Could prices move sideways? Sure. Could they move slightly down? Sure, they could. But what I've seen and the information that I follow tells me that there's a higher likelihood for interest rates to come down in the future, home prices to continue moving sideways to up, which means the longer you wait to buy a home, the more expensive it's likely to be in a monthly payment. And I say that because let's say the interest rates drop to 5.5% in the next 6 months, which I don't think is realistic, but let's say it happens. And at the same time, let's say prices climb by $50,000 during that same period of time. Well, now your payment is the same, or in many cases, probably worse. Or let's say that I'm completely wrong and the opposite happens. And the bond market freaks out, long-term rates spike, and you're priced out entirely, which is essentially what we saw happen to a lot of people in 2023. So my advice is you don't need to time the bottom. You need to be financially prepared when the window opens. Something I always like to mention in videos like this is not a push to get you to go out and buy a house. This video is to push those that are ready to get off the fence. Stop waiting for the perfect opportunities. Stop waiting for the perfect interest rate or the perfect monthly payment because it's not likely to happen. In fact, if you wait for lower rates, chances are you're going to have more competition. You're going to have more of a frenzy trying to get your offer accepted. So instead of focusing on the media, the headlines, and all of that stuff, rather focus on what you can control, which is the right home and the right long-term plan. Now, do me a favor, if you found any value in this video at all, make sure you hit the thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel, and if me and my team can help guide you through the process in any way, make sure you check that link in the description.